The sound wasn't a crash. It was a hiss. A wet, electrical sizzle that smelled like burning plastic and ozone. I stood in the middle of the living room, watching $3,500 evaporate in a cloud of blue smoke. Jackson, my 13-year-old nephew, didn't look sorry. He stood over the custom-built, transparent PC tower. I had spent weeks sourcing an empty can of energy drink, upside down, in his hand, dripping sticky liquid directly into the cooling fans. He looked me dead in the eye and sneered. Before I could even exhale, my brother Lucas was in my face. His face was red. Vin, popping. But not at his son. At me. "You did this!" he screamed, stabbing a finger toward my chest. "You bought the wrong specs, you embarrassed him in front of everyone. You fix this, Elena, or you get the hell out of my house." The room went silent. The investors, the family, the catering staff, everyone froze. I looked at the ruined machine. Then, at Lucas, for the first time in my life. I didn't apologize. I didn't pull out my checkbook. I felt a strange, cold calm wash over me. I reached into my purse, pulled out my car keys, and looked him in the eye. "Okay," I whispered. "I'm gone. Have you ever been the one cleaning up the mess? Only to be blamed for making it? Drop a yes in the comments if you know exactly how that feels. I want to know I'm not the only one. To understand why that moment was the end of the world for my brother, you have to understand the world I built for him. My name is Elena. I am 32 years old. And on paper, I am the Chief Operating Officer of Lumina Events. In reality, I am the ghost in the machine. Lumina is a luxury event planning firm. We do six-figure weddings, corporate galas for tech giants, and private retreats for people who have never booked their own flights. When you see a photo of a Lumina event, you see Lucas. He's the one in the Italian suit, holding a glass of champagne, shaking hands, and laughing with the clients. He's the visionary. He talks about aesthetics and vibes. But while he's charming the clients, I'm in the back hallway wearing a headset, screaming at a florist who brought the wrong hydrangeas, renegotiating a catering contract because Lucas promised a menu we couldn't afford, and transferring funds from 3 different accounts just to make payroll clear on time. I am the architect. He is the billboard. And then there is the glass house. That is what we call it. A sprawling, modern minimalist villa with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It is the kind of house that says, "I have made it." Lucas lives there with his wife, Bianca, and their son, Jackson. He tells everyone he bought it with his bonuses from the big merger deal 3 years ago. He didn't. I signed the lease. I pay the rent. I categorized it as corporate housing under the company expenses so Lucas could maintain the image of a wealthy CEO without actually having the credit score to rent a 1-bedroom apartment. But I let him have it. I let him play the king because I thought that was my job. I promised our parents on their deathbed that I would look after him. I thought looking after him meant protecting him from reality. Bianca, my sister-in-law, certainly enjoyed the reality I provided. She is a woman who treats life like a photo shoot. She never works. Yet, she is always busy. The moment I walked into the glass house that day, before the incident, she looked me up and down with that pitying smile she reserves for the help. "Oh, Elena," she said, sipping a latte that cost $8. "You're wearing that blazer again. We really need to get you a stylist. It reflects poorly on the brand when the COO looks like she shops at a discount rack." I wanted to tell her that the blazer cost more than her entire work ethic, but I didn't. I just nodded. I took the criticism. I took the extra workload. I took the late-night panic calls. I was the reliable one. The safe one. The one who didn't need a thank you. I didn't realize that when you make yourself a doormat, you can't be surprised when people wipe their dirty feet on you. And my brother's family, they were wearing muddy boots. It wasn't just the money. If it had only been the cash, maybe I could have written it off as the cost of doing business with family. No. The real tax was my sanity. It was the time. It was the relentless, grinding exhaustion of being the only adult in a room full of overgrown children. Take last Tuesday, for example. It was 11:45 at night. I had just laid down after a 14-hour shift, managing a crisis for a tech launch in downtown Seattle. My eyes were burning, my body heavy with that specific kind of fatigue that settles in your bones. Then, my phone rang. It was Lucas. "Elena, you need to log in right now." He panicked, his voice breathless. "The budget spreadsheet for the gala? It's broken. The formulas are gone. The client is asking for the projection in the morning, and the whole file is corrupted." My heart hammered. A corrupted file is a disaster. I dragged myself out of bed, opened my laptop, and logged into the server. I pulled up the file. It wasn't corrupted. He had just minimized the toolbar. I clicked one button. The toolbar reappeared. The formulas were fine. "It's fixed," I said, my voice flat. "Oh." He laughed, a sound devoid of any real apology. "You're a lifesaver. I don't know what I'd do without you. I'm just not good with the tech stuff. You know, my brain doesn't work that way." That was the phrase. My brain doesn't work that way. For years, I believed him. I thought he was just scatterbrained. The creative genius who couldn't be bothered with the mundane details of logistics, but sitting there in the dark, looking at the blue light of my screen. I finally let myself see the truth. Lucas isn't stupid. This is a man who can memorize the stats of every player in the NFL for his fantasy league. He can navigate complex sports betting apps, calculate parlay odds in his head instantly, and edit his Instagram photos with the precision of a graphic designer. He figures out exactly what he wants to figure out. His inability to do basic work isn't a flaw, it is a strategy. It is weaponized incompetence. By pretending he can't do the spreadsheet, or doesn't understand the utility bill portal, or forgot how to renew the car registration. He forces me to do it. He knows that I am too responsible to let the company fail, or let the lights get cut off at his house. He knows that if he acts helpless enough, I will step in to save him, because I always have. It is a control tactic, wrapped in a smile. He outsources his adulthood to me, piece by piece, until I am carrying the weight of 2 lives, while he floats through one. And why did I let him? Why did I pick up the phone at midnight? Because of a promise made in a sterile hospital room 6 years ago. Our parents started Lumina events with nothing but a Rolodex and grit. When my father got sick, and my mother followed shortly after, they didn't look at Lucas to save the legacy. They looked at me. "Elena," my father had whispered, his grip weak on my hand. "Lucas. He shines, but he burns fast. You have to be the rock. Promise me you won't let him fall. Promise me you'll keep the family together. You have to be the rock. It is a curse to be the strong child. No one ever asks if the rock is heavy. No one asks if the rock wants to be put down. They just build on top of you, layer after layer, until you are buried so deep, you can't even remember what the sun looks like." I kept that promise. I managed the books. I covered the mistakes. When Lucas spent the catering deposit on a networking trip to Vegas, I moved money from my personal savings to cover it so the vendors wouldn't walk. When he forgot to pay the electric bill for the glass house, and they threatened to cut the power, I set up the autopay from my account. I told myself I was honoring my parents. I told myself I was keeping the family together. But looking back, I wasn't keeping us together. I was being held hostage by a ghost. And the ransom price was getting higher every single day. I just didn't know that the final bill was about to arrive. And it would come in the form of a shattered computer, and a boy who had never heard the word no. The party was less of a birthday, and more of a coronation. Lucas and Bianca had turned the glass house into a showroom. There were silver balloons arching over the entryway, a DJ booth set up by the infinity pool, and a catering spread that I knew, for a fact, cost more than my first car. The air smelled of expensive cologne and truffle oil, and everywhere I looked, there were investors. This wasn't for Jackson. This was a networking event disguised as a milestone. Lucas was working the room, holding a scotch he didn't pay for, laughing too loud at jokes that weren't funny. Bianca was floating between groups of wives, pointing out the custom architecture of the home I was currently leasing for them. I walked in through the side door, my arms straining under the weight of the box. It was heavy, physically heavy. Yes, it was a massive tower case, with tempered glass panels, but it felt heavier emotionally. This box represented weeks of stress. Jackson had demanded a streaming PC. Not just any PC, but a specific, custom-built rig with neon cooling loops and top-tier specs. I had spent nights scouring forums, tracking down parts during a supply shortage, and calling in favors with a vendor in Taiwan just to get the GPU. It cost $3,500. I paid for it. I told myself it was a peace offering. If I could just give Jackson exactly what he wanted, maybe there would be a moment of quiet. Maybe Lucas would see the effort. Maybe I could buy my way out of the resentment for just one afternoon. I set the box down on the gift table, which was already overflowing. Jackson was sitting on the white leather couch, wearing a designer hoodie and scrolling on his phone, looking bored out of his mind. "Happy birthday, Jax," I said, trying to sound enthusiastic. "Open the big one." He looked up, saw the size of the box, and for a split second, he looked interested. He ripped the paper off. The room quieted down. People love a spectacle, and a box that big is a spectacle. Lucas drifted over, sensing an opportunity to show off his provider status. "Look at that," Lucas announced to the room, beaming. "Only the best for my boy." Jackson slid the cardboard cover off. The machine was beautiful. Internal LED strips, liquid cooling, sleek white casing. But Jackson didn't smile. He leaned in, squinting at the specs list printed on the side of the box. "Wait," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but in the sudden silence of the room, it carried. "This says RTX 4080. I stepped forward, smiling nervously. "Yeah, it's a beast, Jax. The 4090 seconds are on backorder everywhere. Literally impossible to get. But the 4080 is still—" "You got the 4080, he interrupted, looking at me with pure disgust. "I told you, the 4090. I specifically said the 4090. This is the old version. It came out 2 months ago," I said, my smile faltering. "It's top of the line." "It's garbage," Jackson shouted. He stood up, his face twisting into a performative rage that I had seen his father use 1,000 times. "I can't stream on this. The frame rates are going to be trash. Why do you always ruin everything?" The room was dead silent now. The investors were watching. The catering staff had stopped moving. And then, he did it. Jackson was holding an open can of energy drink, some neon blue sugary sludge. He looked at me. Then he looked at the open top of the PC case, where the ventilation fans were exposed. "If it's trash," he sneered, "then treat it like trash." He tipped the can. The liquid poured out in a steady, sticky stream, splashing directly into the motherboard and the cooling unit. I gasped. Someone in the back of the room whispered, "Oh my God." The machine hissed. A spark popped, loud and sharp, and a thin trail of gray smoke curled up from the vent. The smell of ozone and burnt sugar hit us instantly. $3,500. Gone in 4 seconds. I stood there, frozen. I waited for Lucas to grab his son. I waited for him to yell, to discipline him, to drag him to his room. I waited for him to be a father. But Lucas didn't look at Jackson. He looked at the crowd. He saw the investors watching, judging the chaos, judging the spoiled child, judging the lack of control. He needed a villain, and he wasn't going to let it be his son. He turned on me. "Elena Lucas Rodez," his face turning that violent shade of red. "What is wrong with you?" He blinked, stunned. "Me." "You knew what he wanted," Lucas shouted, stepping into my personal space, using his height to intimidate me. "You bought the cheap version. You embarrassed him. Look at him. He's upset. You ruined his birthday. He just poured a drink into a $3,000 computer." "Lucas," I pointed at the smoking ruin. "Because he's disappointed," Bianca chimed in, gliding over. Her voice was ice cold, calm, and terrifying. She placed a protective hand on Jackson's shoulder. who was now crossing his arms and pouting like the victim. You know Jackson has sensory issues with disappointment. Elena. You triggered him? This is incredibly selfish of you. You're always so cheap. Trying to cut corners with our family. Cheap, I whispered. The word felt like a slap. I paid for it. I paid for everything. I paid for this party. Don't you dare make this about money. Lucas, he said, lowering his voice, so only I could hear. But with enough venom to kill, you are humiliating me in front of the investors. Fix this. Now. Fix what I asked. My voice, shaking. Apologize to him. Lucas commanded, pointing at Jackson. Tell him you're sorry for buying the wrong gift. And tell him you'll replace it with the right one tomorrow. I looked at Jackson. He was smirking. A tiny, imperceptible lift of the corner of his mouth. He had won. He had destroyed something valuable. And his parents were handing him a crown for it. I'm not apologizing, I said quietly. Lucas checked his watch, then looked at me with eyes that were complete strangers. You have 5 minutes, he said. 5 minutes to say sorry to my son and fix this mess. Or you can get out of my house and don't come back until you learn some respect. I didn't slam the door. Slamming the door is what a teenager does. It's what an emotional, hysterical woman does. It's what Lucas wanted me to do because it would have proved him right. It would have proved that I was unstable, that I was just having a moment, and that I would eventually come back, crying and apologizing, begging to be let back into the fold. So I closed it softly. I walked past the investors holding their wine glasses, past the catering staff, clearing plates, and past the silver balloons arching over the driveway. I walked to my sedan, parked next to Lucas's leased Porsche, and I got in. I sat there for a moment in the silence. The air conditioning hummed to life, cool and sterile against my skin. I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. I expected them to be shaking. I expected to be crying. I expected the crushing weight of guilt that usually follows every single boundary I have ever tried to set. But my hands were steady. My eyes were dry. And then I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a prisoner who realizes the cell door was never locked. For years, I had been terrified of being the bad guy. I swallowed every insult, paid every bill, and fixed every disaster because I was so afraid of being called selfish. I was afraid they would say I didn't care about family. But sitting in that car, watching the lights of the glass house reflect in my rearview mirror, I finally understood. They didn't want a sister. They didn't want an aunt. They wanted a servant. And the moment the servant stood up, she became the villain. Fine. If protecting my dignity makes me the villain in their story, then I will be the villain. I will be the best villain they have ever seen. Because the hero was just a doormat with a different name. And the doormat just stood up? Here is the shortened version. Condensing the narrative while preserving the emotional arc and plot points, structured to maintain the punchy viral rhythm. I didn't go to a bar to vent. I went home to execute. Logging into the company portal, I triggered the morality clause, transferred Lucas's $52,000 slush fund into a secured escrow, and terminated his lease on the company-owned glass house for gross misconduct. The guillotine dropped the next day. During a high-stakes investor lunch, Lucas was publicly humiliated when both his corporate and personal cards were declined. He stormed the office with Bianca, demanding answers. But I was waiting with our general counsel. I revealed the eviction and the embezzlement evidence. When Lucas screamed that he owned half the company, I played my ACE loan agreement he'd signed 3 years ago. A default clause transferred 1% of his voting shares to me. Now, owning 51%. I fired him as co-CEO immediately. I gave him a choice: face a ruinous lawsuit or accept a role as a commission-only junior sales associate. He took the cubicle. I'm not a savior anymore. I'm just the boss. And that is enough.